Hi, I'm Robert Slared, and I'm here today to talk with you again about what we call our God's General's Nugget, or the little insight into one of God's generals, one of God's leaders. And so this month we've been highlighting the great ministry of John G. Lake. He was known as one of the great ministers of healing. As I've said before in my other little nuggets throughout the last 2 months, I mentioned one time that he had 100,000 documented miracles in 5 years, to where Spokane, Washington was declared the healthiest city in America at that time. And so the mayor of Spokane, Washington congratulated all the medical people, the hospital, the doctors, the nurses, and included in that appreciation from the mayor, he included John G. Lake's healing rooms. Now, what's a healing room? John G. Lake developed what we call today the healing rooms, and it was like going to a doctor's office, but instead of getting penicillin or a shot or those kind of things, you would have one of Dr. Lake's healing technicians, I'll call them, or healing physician assistants that would come diagnose what your case was, where your spirit was, where your faith was, and then tell you what to do to build your faith up and to pray for you, and to come back in 10 days or a week, and they'd keep walking you through till you got healed. That's how we got 100,000 documented miracles in 5 years. So I find that most amazing that he could have documented miracles of 100,000 in just 5 years. That's not his whole ministry, but just 5 years. You and I today, if you are listening to the news, we've been talking even just a moment ago about this virus that's coming out of China. And it seems like a lot of our strange diseases come out of the Asiatic world. One of the stories of John G. Lake, when a plague went through South Africa and it was killing leaders and people by the thousands, and the doctors and the nurses and even some of the morticians that would take care of the dead were scared to take care of that, or even bury the dead, because they thought if they touched one of the dead or the germ got on, it would kill them, which is probably true. So John G. Lake was one of the few men that were still ministering at funerals, and he was out there burying the dead, and the scientists and the doctors say, you know, Mr. Lake, don't do that. You're going to get sick and die. And he says, the law and life in Christ Jesus sets me free from the law of sin and death. And John G. Lake called sickness small doses of death. And he said, when that germ hits my body or my hand, it dies, because the law of life in Jesus sets me free from the law of death that's in that disease. That same law of life works in you and me. So we don't have to be afraid of what goes on around about us. Use common sense and trust in God and live bold and go forward. I remember years ago when I went to Africa the first time, I was in East Africa. I went to Uganda. And they had me want to come and ask me to come and pray for people in the hospital. Well, I was thinking American hospital visit, you go and you pray for 1 or 2 people and you leave. Well, they walked me and my team in. They gave one of my team this wing and this team member this wing, and they gave me, since you're the head guy, we'll give you the most critical wing. So I didn't know what that meant. And I walked into this wing of the hospital, which is like a very long rectangular building, and the beds were so close together, you couldn't walk in between them. You could only walk at the foot of the bed. And there was men and women of all ages, and they had what they call the skinny disease. And they didn't know what to call it. So they had the skinny disease, and what they looked like was like Holocaust victims after World War II, when our soldiers went in to liberate the concentration camps. They looked that frail and that thin and that drawn, and they called it the skinny disease. And a lot of people wouldn't work with it because they didn't know what it was. Well, I later come to find out, maybe 2 years later, that what it was the beginning of the HIV/AIDS virus. And I saw its first sweep in East Africa. And a lot of times people say, well, why would you pray for them? Well, we're called as ministers and Christians to pray for the sick and the miserable, no matter what condition they're in. So that means God must take care of us. And I remembered the John G. Lake story, and I said to myself, when I pray for people that have contagious diseases, I pray for people that have things we don't know what it is, the law and life in Christ Jesus sets you and I free. So let's do what we know to do to stay healthy with common sense and stay protected. But what we cannot do, God will do for us. And that law and life in Christ Jesus sets you and I free from sickness, sin, and death. And so that's my nugget for you this week. No matter what we hear in the news, plus we're told in the last days, Jesus said that there'll be pestilence, there'll be diseases, there'll be troubles all over the world. He says, but do not worry. Do not let your heart be troubled. I'm with you. So no matter what we hear in the news, no matter if it's true or exaggerated, let our heart not be troubled. Our God is a healer, and He gives us divine health, and He protects us and your children. So let's walk in that this week. and not be afraid of it. And let's be bold about it, minister to the sick, and enter into those worlds that we are told not to go, but because we have God on our side, we can go anywhere and be protected. I'll see you next week. Have a great day.